Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for the weekend or weekending September 4th, 2022. This is Labor Day weekend here in the United States. Hope you are having a restful and cyber safe weekend. In the security and privacy alerts section, it's kind of interesting. There are, companies we have heard of before, like the NSO Group, who really have been in the news for a lot of bad reasons. They sell software which basically hacks people's phones for a fee, typically for government agencies, sometimes for friendly governments, sometimes for not so friendly governments. They generally try to pretend that they care, but the reality is all they care about is whether your check clears. We have a new player that's made it into the spotlight, which they probably don't want to be in, called Tyke Lab. Tyke Lab is owned by RCS. It's an Italian company. And these guys are accused of hacking all the wrong people. Many of their clients are in poorer countries. And a lot of times this hacking is pretty easy because they are using older phones that are not patched. A lot of times they're not supported. So hacking these things is not very hard. So from that perspective, maybe they're not that skilled, but they're certainly getting attention that they don't want to have. Also in the hacking space, hackers apparently are hiding malware in the James Webb Telescope images. The attack is somewhat convoluted, but it starts with a phishing email with an Office attachment with macros, and you can kind of guess how that works. Generally speaking, not a sophisticated attack, because if you can convince people to open Office files that are downloaded from the internet with macros and enable the macros, well, you kind of get what you want. But that we're seeing that, so you might want to make sure your organization is really clear about what when they open macro or enable macros and when they don't. And maybe the answer is you just don't let them do that. But sometimes you have a business process which requires that, so you don't have a choice. In the reference section, and this one kind of caught me off guard, apparently beginning this year, there are a number of new regulations in both the state and the federal and sometimes even the city level about background checks and other kinds of things, information that you can ask prospective employees about, and when in the hiring process you can ask them. A lot of this is kind of still being worked out in the courts, but at least at this point, if you screw up, then you're going to be liable. You may be able to win if you defend yourself in court, but I think the moral of the story is you don't want to get to court. So if you're not familiar with these new regulations, allow and don't allow, I have a reference to a sheet that kind of lays it out. Here's a nice one. For those of you familiar with the DuckDuckGo browser, it's kind of a privacy enhanced browser. They have released their beta of their email to everyone. The thing about their email that's different about other emails is they strip out all of the web beacons, or at least everyone they can find, before they forward the email onto your regular email address. So it not only does it hide your regular email address, but in addition to that, it goes off and removes the web beacons and tells you that. And it's free. I think there's a paid version also, but there's a free version. In the patching universe, the WordPress team has announced a patch for 3 bugs, which include a high severity SQL bug. In theory, this only affects older versions of WordPress. But remember that WordPress represents about 1/3 of the internet, so there's a lot of WordPress sites out there. I say that in theory because there's a feature which is not turned on by default now, but was turned on by default before. And so if you have an older version, it's possible or even likely that this feature is still turned on because it doesn't necessarily get turned off by the upgrade process. And it is we'll get control of your universe if you get hit by this bug. So I would definitely recommend upgrading if you can. And if you can't, make sure this feature is turned off in your installation so that you are not at risk. Speaking of being at risk, Apple patched a couple weeks ago several WebKit, that's their browser backend, bugs, but they only patched them in the current version of iOS now, and I think we ought to give kudos to Apple for doing this. They've backported the fix to the iPhone 5S, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6 Plus, the iPad Air, iPad Mini 2, Mini 3, and iPod Touch 6th Gen, because they're seeing it being exploited in the wild. These are devices that don't normally get patches. So if you're running one of these older devices, know there is a patch, and you should probably go out and force an update for your phone to get that patch deployed. On the legislative front, this is an interesting one. I kind of like this. The National Defense Authorization Act is kind of the dumping ground for all kinds of cybersecurity bills, because no one wants to be the guy that says we didn't fund our national defense because we got annoyed at some provision or other. So that's a place where we see a lot of provisions, especially in the last couple of years. We've really seen them. This year, one thing that's in there, and of course, no one knows what's going to ultimately wind up being in the NDAA until it's actually done. But right now, there is a part of the bill that says that that software vendors have to certify to the government that each item listed in the software bill of materials is free from all known vulnerabilities or defects affecting the security of the product or the service. So, you have to have a software bill of materials. This is something that's in the cybersecurity executive order, so that should not come up as a complete surprise. But if it does, know that you're going to be signing a certification saying that it's free of all known bugs. And remember, this is one of those places where the False Claims Act comes into effect. If it turns out that there are bugs and you did know about it or should have known about it, then they could come after you. On the education front, our dear friends at the National Security Agency and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence have put out a fairly nice document called Enduring Security Framework, which talks about the things you should be doing for improving your software supply chain security. I would assume that the NSA probably knows a fair amount about the software supply chain security problem, since I'm guessing they probably take advantage of that a lot. And so, using this as a cookbook of sorts, then, I think that's a good idea. And if, you use software, buy software, sell software, then this is probably a place you ought to be looking at. The Twilio breach keeps getting wider in the breach front. We've known there's some name brand folks that have been outed as part of this breach, but now DoorDash has admitted that data was stolen, including names and emails and stuff like that. The good news is that the payment data that was stolen is both limited and doesn't include the full card number, so that's good. And at this point, they don't think that hackers got more sensitive information, but I think this is one that is still rolling out, and I don't think I put a pin in this one saying this is done yet. So just stay tuned. Next in the breaches section, Plex is telling their users to change their passwords after a breach. They say that the passwords were encrypted using best practices, whatever that means. They didn't say what that means. But users should still change their passwords. That's probably a good thing. They also say the hackers didn't get into the database, the money database, so that's also a good thing. But this highlights the importance of segmenting your network. And if you're not segmenting your network, this is definitely something you should be looking at, and we can help you do that. vendor One Touch Point now says their breach exceeds 2 million people. They're an outsourced printing and mailing vendor for companies that mail a lot of stuff like banks and healthcare and stuff like that. Initially, they said there was about 1 million people that were affected. Now they're saying, oops, we're just off by 100%. It wasn't really 1 million, it was really 2 million. Wait a minute. Now 2.7 million. Off by 2/3. I'm sure customers are asking why they couldn't quite figure that. But I think that points to, for a lot of organizations, they don't have enough logging in place to know exactly what hackers touched and what they didn't touch. Again, if you need help with that, then reach out to us. We'll be happy to do that. In the daily blogs, we have some interesting stuff. You know, the school districts around the country are really between a rock and a hard place. They seem to be a target for a lot of mass shootings. Not a great thing. Parents are pressuring them very much to go off and improve the security, but there's no easy answer, and the answers that are out there take a lot of money. Some of the districts are looking at are actually buying AI detecting scanners that detect guns and weapons. Unfortunately, the technology is not quite ready for prime time. It's much slower. It generates a lot of false positives. For example, of students, I mean, after all, why would students have things like binders in their backpacks? Apparently, it's triggering on that. Every time it triggers, they have to do a manual check. This requires more people instead of less people. It creates big lines. So it's really been, according to one school official, a bit of a cluster. But you know, I think their heart's in the right place. It's just that this technology is not quite ready for prime time. Still, you know, they're looking for any possible solution so they can say, "Hey, look, we're doing something." In the next item, one blogger is questioning whether or not one-time passwords are really a liability or benefit. And my opinion to that, just like everything else, if one-time passwords are implemented badly, they're a liability. If they're implemented well, I think they're a positive. So, you know, check out this article to learn what people are doing wrong so that you can do things right. Next, and we don't know whether or not Governor Newsom in California is going to sign this bill. I have a suspicion it's an election year, and it's all about protecting kids. He will. We shall see. But if we do that, this is one of those bills where legislators who don't really understand technology authored a bill, and they don't really understand the unintended consequences of the bill. If this bill goes into effect and it is not struck down in the courts as unconstitutional, it will have a profound effect on any website that people under 18 visit. So, you know, if you're a bank and you support teenagers having bank accounts, if you are a news organization, if you are a healthcare organization that allows people under 18 to access their health records, it's going to totally change the way you interact with your customers. It's going to make it a pain in the ass. It's going to require you to identify your customers in cases where you really don't have any reason to identify your customers and maintain that identification. And customers are probably going to ask them, WTF, why are you doing this? So we shall see whether that goes into effect or whether the governor chooses to veto it. Don't know, but we'll stay on top of this and keep you posted on the result. And lastly, in the security news bites, preventing ransomware is really the only viable option. Here's an article on why that's the case. I don't think I have to explain to people why that's the case, but the collateral damage from ransomware attacks is really bad. And another cyber attack, the library supplier Baker and Taylor got hit by a ransomware, shut down their operations to deal with it, and that means that the libraries that they support that have online services, those online services are now shut down as well. So not only is Baker and Taylor being hit, but so are all of their customers. Bionic Beaver, which is the code name for a new release of Linux distribution, managed to knock those distributions that are implemented inside of Microsoft Azure offline. Microsoft has several suggestions on what to do, none of which are terribly wonderful, but we'll get you back online. And this is one of those things where when you're in the cloud and the cloud provider chooses to upgrade your software and you don't have any control over that, and you don't many times you don't even know that they're doing it, you get to deal with the consequences of them releasing a buggy release. In the ransomware department, again, seems to be a lot of ransomware this week. We're hearing from security vendor Barracuda, nice, Barracuda, of one of their customers that decided to pay the ransom, and the ransomware hackers decide to leak their data anyway. Nice. Just points out that you can't trust crooks, and honor amongst thieves is overrated, apparently. And last but not least, two former Denver teachers, Denver, withdrew their guilty pleas in a cyber espionage case. One of them was in the nuclear navy, was trying to sell secrets to the Russians. Turns out he was trying to sell them to the FBI. They were hiding SD cards inside of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, in dead drops in the park. The prosecutor had proposed something for one of them, 12 to 17-year sentence. The judge did not think that was enough for trying to sell nuclear secrets, so he nixed the plea deal. That's pretty uncommon, but it does happen occasionally. And so they withdrew their guilty plea as a result of that, and they will go to trial. I suspect that they'll come out with something in the middle here, because I think it's going to be, I don't see how they can go to trial and come out with a more favorable situation. I think it's just going to be really ugly if they go to trial. On the other hand, the government probably doesn't want it to go to trial because it makes them look like a bunch of dolts for letting these guys steal and sell nuclear secrets. So it's a win-win deal for everybody if they come up with some kind of settlement. So that's all we have today. Again, as I said, if you need help with segmenting your network or other cybersecurity needs, please give us a call. We'll be happy to assist you. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for listening.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.